Well, welcome aboard. Might be a little bit confused. This isn't Sparky's shop. I'm going to throw a video up on his YouTube channel. So for the most part, this is an experiment, but I just want to go through some of the stuff here with you. Welcome aboard. Let's see here. I got to get this timeout thing. All right, let's see if we can get this to work. So anyway, what I wanted to cover, I'm still in the process of these bell cranks here. I'm going to pop, I think, 4 of these out real quick out of the molds. And that'll be 7 that I got to clean the flash. And then I got this one here I already cleaned up. Once they're in this stage, it's one of these things where you got to go in here and you got to bush the holes, put a ball link or whatever here, and then the shaft. So that's what I got to do with those. Now, I'm not sure if I'm going to get cut off or not. Yesterday, I timed out. I'm not sure if it was the battery. I don't think it was the battery. It had something to do with either my internet connection or YouTube. So if this thing ends abruptly without a warning, that's what it is. So we'll get this camera set up a little bit here. I'll try to go through this fairly quick. So I had these in overnight in this little warming box here, and let's see what I had it at. I probably got it about 90 degrees. Now, yesterday I did a video on my channel, not on Sparky's. So yeah, I'm at 90 degrees in this little warming box. And yesterday when I was doing this video, it's where I got cut off. So let me show you real quick. This is where I keep the resins warm. And what I do in here is cure the parts, I don't know, maybe up to about, it'll go to 125, and that's about maxed out. Now, I can control the temperature of this warming box with this heat lamp, and the heat lamp is hooked to a variac. So as you probably noticed, since the heat lamp's on a variac, you saw it get dim and bright. So that's how I can control the temperature. And I got a little thermometer here in the box. It sort of lets me know where I'm at. And keep all the resins in here, keep them nice and warm. So that's how I basically room temp cure parts. Now if it's anything over this 125, it's in an oven. So and believe it or not, that that heat lamp in there has been in there since the mid-90s. It's unbelievable how long that's lasted. I'm not sure here, my camera angles. Just pop the clamps off these things. I might not demold all of them, but at least I'll get the pins out of them. That's the main thing. So the idea behind this joint stream here, a lot of times, well, one time, Sparky and I did a split screen. We got in here and did a double video. The idea behind it is sort of mix it up, change it up a little bit. I do a lot of the stuff that's different from what he does. Not that he couldn't do it, but how many hours are there in a day, right? So we'll see. It's sort of an experimental thing. Since we don't have the Saturday at John's, maybe we can come up with a, you know, somewhat of a substitute. All right, so I got 4 of them here. Let me grab my Nip-X. Let me get these pins out of here. Some of them come out easier than others. Some of them not so much. On the subsequent pins that I've made since the originals, I put a bend on them, little 90-degree. It gives me more torque and more surface area to pull on. And like I said at the beginning, what I want to do is go through here and get this stuff, get these molds opened up, and I want to show you the landing gear mold. I'd like to lay up one today, and that's this puppy here. And it hasn't been cured in the oven. It hadn't had a good post cure. It's just room temp, but it'll be okay for, you know, a first layup. So what I wanted to do is clean the PVA off, and there's a little bit of, I don't know, it looks like mold wax and whatever here. So I'll clean the mold up and I'll wax it, and then I'll PVA it and make sure it's good and waxed, good coat of PVA, and lay one up. So the first layup, you're guessing, you know, you're trying to figure out how much toe to put in there. So that's what we're going to try to do today, unless I get timed out. And the best thing to do when you start laying up parts for the first time, get a little notebook, keep track of your amount of resin and your fiber that you put in there, so that way once you look at the part, you can go back and adjust it. It's good to have a record. So that's all I do, is just tap the edge and it pops this bell crank out of the mold. Now some of the resin will actually stay in the mold here, and you just take a razor, you sort of trim that off. It just flakes off just like that. And I always wax the face of the mold, and I come down the sides, and that makes it easier to clean up. And then once I get it to this stage, you can see, you know, through it, you can see the mold, and you can tell it's pretty well adhered to the UHMW plate. Let's see, go through here and find my trusty pin down here where you see what I'm doing. So the resin squeezes through this plate. I've got a pretty wide clearance between the pins coming up through this plate, so it all oozes out the top. And what I do, I've got this pin that's the same OD as this bushing. So it's got a little taper on it. And I'll stick that in the epoxy there. And should have a hammer, but these work out good. And it takes a couple good whacks. What you're doing is trying to break it loose. I wonder if this is the one I actually waxed for the second time. I might have missed this one. They normally don't come out quite that hard. Yeah, I'm going to have to flex that plate. I'll get that one out. See how this one comes out. Sometimes if you don't actually clean the resin off as it comes through these holes, it'll lock it in. And of course all the flash comes with it. See if we got anybody chatting here. Nobody chatting. So anyway, that's about all there is to that. Now what I meant by flexing this plate, I'll put this in a vise and I'll bend it a little bit and it'll pop it loose. I've had to do that before. Alright. Knock these resin globs loose. Get those started a little bit. Put her in a vise here. Heard a little bit of popping. Let's see if I can get her out of here. This one here might be stuck here permanent. Let me give it a little bit more tweak. It's starting to come loose. Alright, see if that helps. One of the reasons I try to keep this plate at 3/8 is so I can actually flex it if I have to. And by flexing it, it'll help it release. One of the things with composites, once you think you got it figured out, all you got to do is change one little thing. It's like leave the wax off this plate. It's starting to come out. Put it in a vise here. The other thing is, once these plates become old, they get etched up a little bit. That was a tough release, but I got it. So if you look at this plate, since I don't PVA the plates, after a while it sort of gets a hazy look to it. And that hazy look is like an amine blush, or it's a corrosive curing agent. It builds up and sort of etches the mold, or it'll etch this plastic over time. So what you can do is you can sort of buff it out and re-wax it. It's fine. So the bell crank's fine. It just shows you how tough some of this resin is. Another unscientific way of finding out how well this is cured. Once you take the bell crank out of the mold and you clean the flash, you want to hear a sort of a ping to it. You can tell if it's a dull thud, you know, you want a really nice ping, a sharp sound. Sort of tells you how well it's cured. Real unscientific, but all right. Let's see. Let's get these two out. And this blade here, this blade has been dulled so it doesn't scratch my mold up. I'll run it across some sandpaper. And if you do scratch your mold up, just sand it, buff it, or whatever you got to do, and re-wax it, PVA it or whatever. All right. Let's see if this one comes out easier. I think it will. Yep. Yeah, the trials and tribulations of composite parts. These all look pretty good, really. I mean, there's no voids, or took my time laying them up. I remember trying to speed up the process a few times and rush, and ended up regretting it. Let's see, maybe this is another one I didn't wax. I had a pile of them there and I couldn't remember which ones I put wax on. I think I'm going to go over there and make sure I got wax on all of them. So that's how long it takes to demold 4. Been a lot quicker if I didn't have the one that was a little sticky. And you can tell maybe by the flash, it's clear resin here and I get just a little washout. It's not much, a little chop that I put on top. So with these kind of parts, I think when you design the part, if you can design that into the part where you can actually compensate for a little washout. Now here's the PVA. Spray this on. This is over the top of the wax. And the PVA comes off like a bad sunburn. Just like that. Now, a lot of times instead of actually picking it off, I just take these and run them under warm water all at once, and it cleans them all up quicker than this. But you can see that the PVA, you've got a physical barrier here. So maybe 1,000, so I don't know. So between the surface coat in here and the PVA, it gives you a really nice surface to push hard and compact that toe in there. And then the PVA was sprayed in a matte finish. So that's what that looks like. You sort of see how it's got the matte finish, cosmetic. Okay, now next thing I want to do, put these over here to wax them. Next thing I'm going to do is work on this landing gear mold. Now to clean this thing up, you can actually run it under water. You can just use Windex since it's one piece. And I don't know if it's obvious from the camera, but I've got this mold marked, and when you close the mold, it's got to be oriented the right way. So I've got marks scratched or etched into this mold right here. And it's real important. Let's say you did a propeller or a 3-blade mold or even a landing gear, and you're in a hurry, you lay it up and you're not paying attention to look at the inside of the mold, and all of a sudden you push it together this way and it sort of goes together, and then you start clamping it. Well, then you ruin your mold, and then you've got trouble. So I always etch lines to let me know that the mold goes together one way. So on this mold, I like to go around everything and clean off the sharp edges, like out here on the perimeter, and that way you're not ending up slicing your hands up. And it's a no-brainer. Basically, you just take a file. You can use a sanding block, file, whatever you want to use. I like the control of the file. And I just go around the whole mold and I clean up any little flashing. Of course, you do this before you wax it or do anything. Now, this seems hard. It's filing. It's, you know, it's pretty machinable, but it's still green. And eventually, after I lay up this first one, I'll post cure this mold in the oven. I'll probably try to get it up around 250. And if you go back to the my channel, when I was laying this mold up, I was short some resin. It was only like 3/4 of an inch right here. And it's not on video. My camera cut off. But I had to make a choice of either add more resin here or something in there to get more strength on this mold since it's so thin in this cross section. So what I did is I embedded a piece of this metal tube down in here. It's about that long right there. So if you think of it as sort of a beam or some rebar or whatever, but it'll make a difference. It'll give some stability to the mold. Now, one of the things I didn't do is fill the tube up with resin. I probably should have made it solid, but it's hollow in there, so I don't want to go too warm on the post cure, so I'll play around with that. I'll ease up on it. I don't want it to expand too much inside of that mold. when you file this casting resin, sort of neat, it starts to expose the aluminum. And I've had some of these castings or molds that I've made, I've actually sanded and buffed them a little bit, and it starts to look more and more like aluminum. So this part here, this isn't part of the mold, that's just the overhang. So the landing gear comes up to here, and then the bottom part of the mold forms the leg. Now I'll be careful, I don't want to file any of this, so I'll probably go through there with some sandpaper. So this is pretty boring. It's just sort of like the old sanding trick. It's important to get this part right. The other thing on these molds, it doesn't really matter what it is, if it's composite anyway, casting, you can go through there and let's say you have a void somewhere and it's where you don't want it. You can actually take a Dremel, grind it out, and refill it with the same casting resin. Or you could use it, if it's a small pinhole, you could just CA it if it's a low temp, room temperature, and then sand it. So it's all machinable. So don't think it's all for nothing. If you get a little defect in the face of your mold or something's not right, you can go through there and fix it. Can't tell on the camera, but these corners are really sharp. All right. You'll see, I don't know if you'll notice it, but there's like a hardwood piece right here. You see it? And that runs all the way across here. The reason that was glued in there is to hold this mold. When I was making this mold, I put that piece across to pull it in tight. So it was springing out a little bit too much, and then it wasn't making contact with the gear, so I glued a piece of wood all the way across, and the parting board for this mold was pinched together tight to where it squeezed the gear a little bit, so that way it was the right shape. So that's, if you notice that on the ends here, that's what that is. And it looks like I tacked this gear down in this mold with some CA, and you can still see a little CA in there, just like little tack spots. I'll go through there and scrape that out. I think I CA'd right on the wax, so the CA is actually, it's releasing. Now, whatever you do to the inside of this mold, you know, that's your finish on your landing gear, so remember that. So if you have to go in here and sand or do anything, and you want the part to be finished smooth and shiny or whatever you want, remember this face of the mold, it'll reflect your part. Now, let's see, on this part of the mold, this is a really sharp edge right here. Now, the more I sand this down, the more flash I'm going to get. But I try to take a little bit off of it because I don't want it to be as fragile as it is. So I'll go through there and sand that really sharp edge off. And if you look, I don't know if you can see, but there's like little pinholes there, like a couple of them. I'll probably just fill that up with CA for now. And there's another little blob of resin. The other thing right there, there's like little bumps. This was the master part. And you'll see this auto body putty right here. That's to fill all the voids in his carbon gear. So if you have a pinhole here or a little indentation, it'll show up as a bump right here. And that's what those couple pieces, that's what these little spots are, little bumps. And I don't get too picky, because I'll show you, I'll just sand those out. And this mold will always probably be made with wax and PVA. So the PVA, it'll transfer all the mold imperfections, but you can cover up some of them, you know, by spraying the PVA thick, or you can spray it to where it's got a matte finish. Like I said, the more you take away from this sharp edge, the more, you know, you've got flashing. There's a happy medium there. So I've got it all pretty close. I'm going to take, this is 320 it's used. No, it's 1,000, I'm sorry. This will work. I'm going to take this 1,000 grit and I'm going to go in here and sand these teeny little bumps on this inside of this mold. And it's just like anything else. You can take this 1,000 grit, sand the inside of this mold, go to 2,000 or 3,000, just keep going until finally you get to the point you can buff it and put a mirror finish back on it if that's what you want. So I'll be happy with just a nice smooth matte finish. And this is just straight Windex. I think I still have a little PVA residue in there. It's looking pretty good. So this isn't a control line gear. This landing gear is made for an RC fun fly. The landing gear mold, the technique, the way I made this mold is exactly like I made a control line mold. The only difference is the shape of the part. So if you'd want to do a carbon gear for, it doesn't matter what it is, you just come up with a master, it's whatever shape you want, but it's just, this is the process, or the way to do landing gears I found to be the easiest to do and the most foolproof way of doing them. So this is coming up pretty nice. It's got a nice finish on it. as I lay up this part today, hopefully I don't get timed out. As I do this part, I might come back afterwards after looking at it and change some things on this mold. So I got a little spot there, it could be fixed. And I got a couple little bubbles. And I think what I'm going to do, I'm going to go through there and put a little clay or something in there, or wax. And then I'll fix those later. I'll go in there and work on that after I at least pull one part out of it and see what we're getting. So people tuning in, they probably look at this video and say, dang, what the heck's Sparky doing with a mold? Got everybody confused. All right. I guess that'd be like walking into a hobby shop and then having groceries sitting on the shelf. Get you all confused. So this half of the mold, it still looks like there's some PVA and clay. Let me clean this up. And if you're getting down in this mold and you're having trouble getting into the corners, just take a dull razor, put the towel around it, and you'll be able to push that paper towel down in the little corner. Probably the hardest part about making these parts is trying to figure out the geometry of the mold and how you're going to do it. When I worked at a machine shop for a while, it was almost like people that knew how to jig stuff up. That was the black magic, the fixturing and the holding of the part. It had a lot to do with production and how well the part came out. And I'll go through here where I scrape those little teeny bumps like a pinhead. I'll sand the inside of this down. Now, one of the reasons you see me use so much PVA is I've had a couple catastrophic lockups on some parts I was making. One of the parts, it was a little helmet. Sparky has a copy of it, and the mold was only about 4 inches square. And I thought, you know, this would be a good one to experiment on with a different release agent, and you know, because obviously if something goes wrong, it's not like a 3-bladed prop or a fuselage molding or something. It's just a small helmet. I had more trouble with that mold. The first one I made was a catastrophic lockup, and the bad part about that was I spent a lot of time sanding and carving that little helmet out. So obviously I lost my plug, my master. So then I had to go back and make another master and change my release agent and process, and it came out, I can't remember, it wasn't perfect, but I didn't lose the plug. I lost the mold. And I was never so frustrated because it seemed so simple. The draft angle was, you know, perfect and everything. But I ventured off my beaten path of stuff that worked 100% of the time. And I started experimenting around, which is good. I guess you're going to experiment. You do the small stuff. I think the third attempt, I went back to the PVA and the wax and just the old school. And then I got a good mold. The problem is, if you take, let's say this casting, this was probably, what, a week ago when I laid this up. And this isn't post-cured. This is still green. Even though it's hard and it files and sands and buffs, the resin is still green. And if I'd use a chemical release on this and pour this or vice versa, what happens is the epoxy's a nut and a bolt. And then, unless it's post-cured and then completely mixed perfectly, the nut doesn't have a bolt or the bolt doesn't have a nut. So PVA forms a physical barrier. So PVA is like this. Once the resin hits the PVA, it cannot see the resin here on the other side of it. It's physical. When you put a chemical release, it's a release, but on the atomic level, or the cross-linking of the resin, that nut will look for that bolt or vice versa on the other side and link to it. So even though you have a part that comes apart, well, you'll still pull like an inch or two here, or, I mean, it's well, catastrophic. So the best thing to do when unless you're a professional shop and you've got everything down perfect, the post-cure, and you know exactly what you're doing, and even the pro shops probably use PVA, but use PVA, wax and PVA. And if you've got a draft angle, it'll come apart. So that's my advice there. Now, you can take wax on this and then put epoxy against it, and obviously it still comes off even harder sometimes. But there's nothing to cross-link in this plastic. It might stick to it, but it's not cross-linking. And that's why you can get away with waxing plastic and other things. But as soon as you put resin against resin, especially if it's green, you better have the PVA on it. Now, I've had a prop mold I made. It was a high temp prop mold. And I cured it to like 300 degrees. And intermittently throughout the ramp up of the cure, I put free coat on it. And I flooded it out and I laid the free coat, which is a aerosol mold release. And basically I cured that free coat into the mold. And then I laid up the prop. When it was a high temp prop, I heated that mold to like 120, laid the prop up, stuck it in the oven at 200, and I think I ramped it to 250. So long story short, here I am with a brand new mold, no PVA, high temp, and I used free coat. Pulled the pin out of it and it opened and it was perfect. It didn't stick anywhere. The release was 100%, and but that's one of those things. If I wouldn't have post-cured that mold before I laid it up, I'm almost guaranteed I would have had trouble. So now there's a couple pinholes. Let's see, let me get a little clay. I'm going to rub some wax and clay into these. There's a couple right here on this flange. So the other thing with this composite stuff, it'll drive you crazy, is clay. Now, there's all different types of clay. Some of it's more formable than others. This is the old green clay, the Gumby clay or whatever, and it's got sulfur in it, so you can't use this clay when you're doing silicone. And so, but PVA and wax goes over this stuff really, really good. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take a little clay, and it's really smearable. It's really easy to flare and move around. So what you can do, you can take a little wax. This is sort of a liquid wax, but you can buy the same thing in a paste form. And this wax can actually melt into this sulfur clay. And this green sulfur clay, I got this at American Art Clay. It's up there in Park 100 in Indianapolis. And I always joked around. I said, give me some of that Gumby clay. And they laughed. They said, you know, that is what they used when they did that stop animation with Pokey and Gumby. They got their clay through them. And I thought, well, it always looked like the right color of green, so that's a little trivia there, that the Pokey and Gumby clay came out of Indianapolis. Now the people that are younger, they don't know that. They don't know about Pokey and Gumby. So the trick here is you get this wax and you got to get it down in the crevice. Colin said thumbs up, so I think I'm good as far as the noise. So I hear my cat wanting out. I might have to go over there and let my cat out. He likes to come out in the shop. He thinks he's missing something right now. Right. So don't worry about getting too much wax on this thing. Just put a liberal amount on it. And I took a composite course out here at the airport one day. They kept talking about they need 7 coats of wax. I said, well, you're supposed to put it on and take it all off and put it on. I said, why would you go 7 coats if you could do it perfect 2 or 3? I don't know, he didn't really have an answer. So basically, I guess they're just trying to get you to 100% coverage. I don't know. But the thing is, when you start rubbing this wax on this mold, if you don't have wax or there's something funny about it, the PVA won't stick to it, won't flow out. The PVA will actually, it'll fisheye on you. It won't flow. So since it's a brand new mold, I like to cover 100% of this mold all the way around it, 360. So that way, when this resin starts to drip over the mold and get all over the place, it's easy to clean off. So I go over the whole thing. One of the things we've talked about, some of the guys were talking about model airplane stuff. The skill set you can acquire through doing hobbies can be transferred into other things. And it sort of sounds crazy, but if you're going to be in the skilled trades, and it really doesn't matter what kind of skilled trades, whether it's plumbing, electrical, carpentry, finished carpentry, cabinet making, it's training your mind to think geometrically, I guess, if that's a word, out of the box. Or a lot of this stuff that I've learned in a shop building model airplanes is transferred into actually going out in the field and doing the real stuff. I've done everything from almost like volunteer Habitat for Humanity stuff all the way to a commercial job site. Now this commercial job site, all I was doing was the finish carpentry in this office, and it was something sort of unconventional. That's why they had to have a finish carpenter to build it on site. But all the things that I was trying to do hobby-wise with woodworking, it really transferred into doing that job. And I'm not saying they're all like this, but if you're really good and you want to get out there and learn a craft and you're good, there's no reason why you can't earn 100,000 or more. And I'm not saying it's going to be easy, but you got to be young enough to do it. It takes a lot of stamina, but the money's there where it never used to be. So the old people, they're retiring, and there's a huge amount of tools, machinery, knowledge out there right now. And a good example, you know, you can see, get online, you can buy some of these metal lathes and Bridgeports, and now that the CNCs have been out for a while, those things are going pretty cheap now. There's a lot of junk out there. You can get burnt really easy on that stuff, but if you really know what you're doing and you've worked around these machines and you've repaired them, you know that there are some pretty good deals out there. Now this wax is pretty thin. You could do the same thing with a paste wax, so don't feel like it has to be this thin. Hopefully my gun I'm going to spray PVA on is going to work today. And if I don't get this laid up, I'll do it on another video. If I get timed out or something, or I know Sparky, he'll go through here, you know, at least an hour sometimes. So if you want to bear with me or catch me later, that'll be good. So I think it's looking pretty good. I don't see any spots I missed. Now let's say I spray the PVA and I got a spot that's bubbling up or fish eyeing or whatever. It's not that big a deal. You just come back with a rag with a little bit more wax, buff the PVA off in that area. You don't even have to do the whole mold again, just do that area. And then spray more PVA. I've had to do that a few, well, more than a few times. But. And of course, like that plate, you'll notice I didn't actually wax it. I wasn't sure which ones I waxed, and I started using them anyway, and I had one of those plates stick to the bell crank. Not catastrophic, but so normally on this here I'd scrape off a little bit of the extra flash that's oozed out, and then with the I'll keep this rag out and I'll go through here and give it a nice buff. And I'll leave a little film on there. You don't have to really buff too hard. That's all you need to do with this. And I go around the corner. I try to get the edge so that way it's easy to clean these globs off. And I'll knock those out then later, but go around the edge here. And if you want, just do both sides, so that way your clamp can come loose. The other thing you can do is put wax on your clamp feet. All right, we'll fire up the PVA. I got some in a gun already. I'll get a coat of PVA on there. I got to find a couple tabs to do this out here. So this clamps top and bottom, but I also have to clamp out here. So I got a couple aluminum plates somewhere. Or worst comes to worst, I can just use this. We'll figure out something. All right, let me get my PVA here. PVA is polyvinyl alcohol, and it's cheap. I think I looked the other day, you can buy a gallon for $20, $30, and I've done a lot of molding, and I've only gone through a gallon. So if you buy a gallon, don't worry, it's going to last you almost forever for doing this. So this gun, it's a Thayer Chandler. It must be all stainless steel because I just leave the PVA in it. If you have an aluminum gun or a cheap one, the PVA is corrosive. It'll eat up your needle. So keep that in mind. I'll plug the compressor in here. Unplug my heat lamp. Otherwise, if I got my heat lamp going and I put a compressor on the electric strip that below the strip breaker. All right, let's see how this PVA goes in here. So the PVA so far is laying down really nice. I don't know if you can tell, but I spray it on, sort of a glossy coat, and then I'll flatten it up with a subsequent coat. See that or not, but a bigger gun would speed things up, but this is good for the bell cranks getting down in the hole. So this is okay, I guess. One of the things you can do with PVA too, if you have to, I mean, you can thin it, but it's sprayed right out of the can. I wouldn't thin it. I've never had to do it, but some guys do. And I'm running, let's see, the air pressure, let's see, I'm running 80 pounds at the compressor, so it might be 65 or 70 here. So I've got a lot of pressure. Anybody that paints will tell you you need to gauge at the gun to know exactly what you got. But as long as the PVA is coming out, I know what I got. So when this mold is made, basically this will be on the top, this will be on the bottom, this will be the bottom. So I'll make sure I get a lot of PVA on this. I'll stretch the PVA out here before I come up on this part of the mold too. Only thing I want to say, I don't know if he's watching or not. Sparky, if you're watching, you better be out of the chair. That's all I got to say. So the way I look at it, you can't put too much PVA on this thing at this point. It's a brand new mold. Oh, brand new mold. I want to make sure that it releases. One of the things, once you use the mold half dozen times or whatever, I refer to it as being seasoned. It's like an iron skillet. The more you use it, the better it gets. The other thing I do, I might not do it today if I lay this thing up, but I'll take this PVA and I'll put like a gel coat in it, and